correspondent Kelly O'Donnell, who, as I just mentioned, has confirmed the news that John Kerry has conceded to President Bush. Kelly, can you hear me? Good morning.
Yes, good morning, Matt. What has been a difficult night for the Kerry campaign after believing that it had fought very well against the president, believing it had made the argument for change. Senior advisors to Senator Kerry say the phone call to the president to concede has in fact taken place, and the plan for a concession speech will go forward at 1 o'clock today at Faneuil Hall in Boston. Senator Kerry is expected to thank his supporters and to try to set a tone of unity after what has been a very divided election. Of course, Senator Kerry retains his seat in the United States Senate, and I expect that from what advisors are saying, that he will thank the people of Massachusetts who have supported his candidacy, of course thank his family, and all of the volunteers and staffers and supporters who have worked on his behalf. Senior advisors worked through the night, calculating all of the options that would be available to them, looking at the math, and while I don't at this point know how all of that was determined, a decision was reached, a phone call to the president was placed, and Senator Kerry is expected at 1 p.m. to end his candidacy for the White House.
Kelly, do you have any information? I know it's hard to come up with this based on a conversation, a private conversation between two individuals, but on the tone of the conversation between Senator Kerry and the president?
Well, I didn't get any indication about that, but I can say that from the way that advisors had prepared for this day, that what they were intending to do was to try to create a tone of unity going forward. That was evident in the senator's remarks just after he voted, at a time when his campaign thought he was, in fact, likely to do very well. Not so confident that they really at this.
We're
okay,
clearly
Kelly,
having some cell phone problems.
I was going to say, I think her
Kelly.
cell phone has run out of juice, perhaps, but we're going to turn to Norah O'Donnell, who's at the White House, for more information on this concession call that we've reported on. Norah, what can you tell us from there?
No official reaction yet from the White House. The president's top advisors with the president right now in a meeting. It's noteworthy, Katie, they here at the White House thought that this was going to happen last night. And it was sometime at about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning when they called up the news photographers from the major news magazines like Time Magazine, News Magazine, who they wanted to capture this very historic moment. They brought them up into the residence area in the Red Room, where they waited for 4 hours. Some of the photographers saying that they couldn't even go to the bathroom. They were held. That was how much the White House thought that the president would get a call from Senator Kerry last night. It wasn't until like 4 or 5 in the morning when they finally let those photographers go and say, it's not going to happen. The president's not going to get a call from Senator Kerry. So they've been waiting for this call. All day long, the White House has been trying to project a sense of confidence, project a sense of inevitability. It started before dawn when the White House Chief of Staff went over to the Ronald Reagan building and said, President Bush has won this election. It was a decisive victory. He has won Ohio. He has won more votes than any presidential candidate in history. And they let surrogates and they put them out to say, all right, Kerry, we'll give you some time before we say anything. Clearly, that call now has been made to the President of the United States. And of course, after we hear from Senator Kerry, we will likely hear from President Bush, who is expected to go to the Ronald Reagan building to address the nation and to address his supporters about winning a second term in office. Very important to note, Katie, those people that are with the president today, his family, and also his father, who failed to win a second term. And it is noteworthy that in the president's book, his biography, he talks very poignantly about the fact that he was the one who had to tell his father that the exit polls weren't going very well, that his father would not win a second term. There is that bond between the two of them, the natural father-son bond, but also as two men who are political competitors, who are both presidents. And I ran into President 41 last night, and he looked emotionally drawn and had said he was glad that it looked like they were turning their direction. So that will be a key moment today, Katie.
All right, NBC's Norah O'Donnell at the White House. Norah, thanks so much.
Joining us now on the phone is NBC's Washington Bureau Chief and moderator of Meet the Press, Tim Russert. Tim, apparently just after 11 o'clock Eastern time this morning, John Kerry conceded to the president. How much pressure was he under?
Matt, he understood that, as we talked about this morning, that he wanted to do the right thing. He met with his staff. He realized that mounting a long and drawn-out attempt to deal with the ballots in Ohio was untenable, that the votes just weren't there, and that now is the time to be gracious and statesmanlike. And he called the president conversation, according to someone I spoke to. And now he very much wanted to do that before the president came out and just accepted without any kind of concession. I mean, there is an orderly process in American politics, in one in which someone wants to be, an honorable loser, if you will. And John Kerry has always been, throughout his public and private life, a gentleman. And I think he's demonstrating that today.
And Tim, let me read you something from the AP Wire. Quote, "Congratulations, Mr. President," Kerry said in the conversation described by sources as lasting less than 5 minutes. The Democratic source, one was a Republican, one a Democrat. The Democratic source said Bush called Kerry a worthy, tough, and honorable opponent. Kerry told Bush the country was too divided, and Bush agreed. "We really have to do something about it," Kerry said, according to this Democratic official. Clearly, uniting the country, it seems like it might be number one on the president's agenda, right, Tim?
Yeah, Katie, he had talked about being united, not a divider. This is going to be a very interesting test, I think, for George Bush in his second term, because there are many people who want him to interpret his 3 million popular plurality in the popular vote as a mandate to put forward a conservative agenda. And many new members of the Senate ran on a very conservative agenda. And yet the president doesn't have to seek re-election anymore. And will he use this as an opportunity, his second term, to try to unite the country, to find common ground? That was certainly the theme of Senator Kerry's phone call to him. And it's also what many people who have known the Bush family for some time are urging the president. A former senator from Wyoming, Alan Simpson, has been very strong in this, that the system is really being tested, and that with several Supreme Court nominations coming up, and no doubt there'll be major changes in the Bush cabinet, there's going to have to be some attempt to reach some conciliation between Democrats and Republicans if the president wants to have a successful term.
All right, Tim Russert, thanks so much, Tim. Go back to sleep. You sound pretty drowsy. Thanks, Tim.
I'll see you soon.
Okay.
All right. Douglas Brinkley is a presidential historian and a Kerry biographer, and he joins us now. Douglas, who would have been most influential for John Kerry in these past couple of hours, helping him make this particular decision to concede to the president?
One person, his wife, Teresa. They've been an inseparable team. She's done so much on the campaign trail. Back last December, 11 months ago, Kerry looked like he wasn't going to get the Democratic nomination. Teresa Heinz Kerry would go back to Iowa time and time again, and they really were a team, and she's his advisor first and foremost. Also his daughters, who have really engaged with their father on the campaign trail in a very real way. I think this is a family decision, although, of course, he was listening to Mary Beth Cahill and Bob Shrum and other advisors.
Douglas, talk a little bit about the roller coaster that must have been in place last night. They're both for President Bush, but in this case for John Kerry, early exit polling had to have him feeling very, very good, and here we are 12, 14, 16 hours later, and he's conceding.
It was euphoric around Camp Kerry. I mean, the fact that the Zogby poll, the exit polls showed that Kerry looked like he was going to have a victory, and that spread. People started believing it, and you could just go out on the plaza, Copley Plaza in Boston, and there was a period of time where it was a victory dance. The energy level was frenetic and sky high, and suddenly, somewhere around the time that Florida was lost, there was just deadness everywhere. The streets were dead. I was in the Westin Copley Hotel with some of the Swiftboat crew that served with John Kerry. They were all here from PCF 44 and 94 and Max Cleland and on, and you could just feel a kind of deadness and inevitability. And when NBC News last night with Brokaw and Russert declared Ohio, it was just a ghost town. You just saw dejected Kerry Edwards supporters, their heads hanging low, wearing their pins, but their balloons had been popped.
Meanwhile, Doug, we only have a few seconds left, or actually we have a minute left, so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of post-election analysis by the Kerry campaign. And when they try to determine what went wrong, what are those things that you think will sort of stand out?
Well, immediately in this situation, the people are going to be in the Kerry camp angry about Ohio. What went wrong? They had a positive projection for the state. It didn't happen. But once that sentiment, a little finger pointing ends, The reality, I think, is mainly two things. The youth vote, that cell phone generation vote, first-time voters did not come out to the percentages the Democrats hoped. And I think the Catholic vote, oddly, John Kerry is a Catholic, but there have been a lot of controversy, and in some of those industrial towns in Ohio that has Catholic communities, I'm not sure they rallied around Kerry as much as, say, Catholics did around John F. Kennedy back in 1960.
Well, certainly his pro-choice position alienated many of them, and with Catholic bishops coming out publicly and saying he should not be permitted to take a communion, that must have had some impact as well.
Douglas, thank you very much. We appreciate it, and we have word, as we mentioned, that John Kerry will make a public concession speech at 1 o'clock Eastern Time this afternoon. We're back right after this. Breaking news this morning, Senator John Kerry conceded the race for president a little earlier. That in a phone call to President Bush after a long night considering whether to stretch out the vote and the count in Ohio. The word of Senator Kerry's concession came less than a half an hour ago. A call from Boston to the White House. I'm Matt Lauer along with Katie Couric, and according to the Associated Press, the conversation lasted a little less than 5 minutes. The Massachusetts senator telling Mr. Bush, quote, "Congratulations, Mr. President."
That's right. A Democratic source told the Associated Press that Senator Kerry told President Bush the country was too divided, and the president agreed. According to the official quoted by the AP, Senator Kerry said, "We really have to do something about it." The senator is scheduled to make his concession speech from Faneuil Hall in Boston at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. NBC News will, of course, carry that concession speech live.
Throughout the night, Kerry's campaign thought about asking for all the provisional votes in the battleground state of Ohio to be counted, even though Senator Kerry trails by about 136,000 votes there. But apparently, the senator and his top advisors decided not to take any further action.
NBC's White House correspondent David Gregory joins us now by phone. David, hi, what are you hearing?
Well, as you say, the call came in to the president about 15 minutes ago, according to an advisor who was in the room. The president was in the Oval Office surrounded by his inner circle, Karl Rove, Karen Hughes, Dan Bartlett, his chief speechwriter, Mike Gerson, when the call came in. You've quoted from the call from Senator Kerry's own words in their discussion. After he put the phone down, I'm told there were hugs all around, and the president simply said, "We did it, team." It capped a pretty incredible night for them of ups and downs and deep frustration, both with Senator Kerry and indeed even with the networks. They were eager to have the race called last night. The president, about 5 in this morning, huddled with those same advisors in the residence, decided to not to give a speech at the Reagan building to supporters, but to simply wait, and now they've gotten the concession they wanted.
Meanwhile, David, I know that given the results of early exit polls yesterday afternoon, there must have been some high anxiety in the White House as they awaited the results. Did you talk to some folks then?
Well, it was amazing, Katie. I was on Air Force One, and as we were descending into Andrews Air Force Base, they got word of the first round of exit polls. And the president, I'm told, getting that news was clearly dejected. They had known for some 24 hours that the race was not looking good for them. They were increasingly worried. The president's father was pessimistic. And the president told his top advisor, Karen Hughes, on Air Force One as they were about to land yesterday, the numbers are what they are, he said, and I'm surprised. That's a direct quote. They were dejected. Things started to turn around within a few hours. Once they had made a determination, an argument that original wave of exit polling was undercounting Republican voters, they really started to feel better about what they were seeing in Florida and indeed Ohio. And the trajectory just kept going up for them throughout the night, and they felt increasingly better about things.